Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're aiming for something, well, something big. We're trying to give you the blueprint for reality itself.
Right, not just a metaphor for it.
Exactly. We're diving into some source material that asks a question that sounds, it sounds almost purely philosophical.
What are you, structurally?
Yeah. But the sources, they insist the answer isn't philosophy. It's geometry. Pure, beautiful geometry.
It's a pretty astounding claim, really, that your entire identity, your sense of self, all your memories, even your free will, it's not some vague psychological thing.
It's a precise four-dimensional structure.
A structure you can map, and that's what the material calls a unified field diagram for consciousness.
So our mission today is, let's say straightforward, but definitely complex. We're going to take this blueprint, the living node,
Which is the fundamental unit of reality in this model.
and we're going to try to translate it layer by layer. The goal is to make this complex geometry feel less like math and more like, well, a map of your own experience.
And to answer those core questions, how does this shape generate you, and how does it connect to the physical world around you?
To do that, we have to start with the basic terms. A node.
Right. And a node in this context is really simple. It's anything you can think of or describe.
Like a chair.
A chair, an atom, a city, the concept of justice. If you can define its boundaries, it's a node. But the key distinction here, the one everything else is built on, is the difference between a regular node and a living node.
And the sources are clear that no node is truly dead, right? It can just appear static.
Exactly. It's more of a binary state. Is it active or is it dormant? And what determines that life, that activity, is the geometry of the engine inside.
Okay, so what is that engine?
It's the presence of a full, dynamic, toroidal electromagnetic flow.
Tori meaning donut shapes.
Donut shapes, yes. So imagine a rubber ball. It's just a sphere. Its surface is static. That's a dormant node.
Okay.
Now imagine inside that same spherical shell, there's a rapidly spinning gyroscope. It has immense internal motion, structure, flow. That's the living node.
So the sphere we see, the third-dimensional object, is just a projection of this engine pulsing inside.
It's just the shell. And if that internal flow gets too slow or too symmetrical, the surface appears static, the node goes dormant.
But the architecture is still there.
The core architecture always remains, and that underlying structure is what we have to map first.
Okay, let's unpack that core architecture. If we're visualizing this living node, it's all about these donut shapes. How many are there, and how do they actually build a self?
We're dealing with 4 of them, 4 overlapping kind of squash tori, and the most important part is that they're paired up.
Paired up.
And these pairings define the 2 primary boundaries of your experience, the external self and the internal self. The geometry isn't just describing something, it's prescribing the experience.
Let's start with the external self then. The sources say it's made from 2 of these exterior tori interlocking, and that creates an outward-facing disk. Can you make that practical for us? What is that disk doing?
Think of that outward-facing disk as your immediate operating system. It's the part of you that's totally concerned with the now.
The present moment.
Entirely.
Yeah.
Geometrically, when those 2 exterior tori intersect, the energy flow is maximized outward, so it governs all of your immediate responses.
Like instinct.
Instinct,
Yeah.
your social interface, physical drives, what you're paying attention to in this very second. It's the self that's constantly asking, is this safe? Should I eat this? How do I react to this person standing right in front of me?
So it's the social mask, the survival mechanism.
It's all of that. It's your vehicle for interacting with the present. So if that disc is really dominant in someone,
You get someone who's extremely reactive, maybe very charismatic, but maybe impulsive too. They're always driven by what's happening around them.
precisely, they'd be fantastic in a crisis, in any high-action environment, but they might really struggle with deep reflection.
Which brings us to the other side of the coin.
The mirror pair, the internal self.
Yeah.
And this is generated by the other 2 tori, the interior ones, interlocking to form an inward-facing disc.
So this sounds like the deep, silent computer running in the background.
It is. The inward disc is all about reflection, memory, and long-term planning. Its energy flow is directed primarily back onto itself.
It's the storyteller.
It's the storyteller, exactly. This is the part of you that creates the narrative. Who am I, really? Why did I do that embarrassing thing 5 years ago? What trajectory should I be on for next year?
It gives all the context.
It provides the context and the moral history for all the rapid-fire actions that the external self is taking. And the conscious experience of being a person is really just the dynamic tension between these 2 disks spinning.
So you have the external self wanting the donut, right now,
Mm-hmm.
and the internal self is already calculating next week's diet plan. There's a constant conflict there.
Yeah.
How does this system mediate that? Because that brings us to the third output, doesn't it?
It does. That mediation, that balancing act, it happens at the absolute core of the structure. So you have the external sense of self and the internal sense of self, and then you have the single point that anchors the whole thing.
The core identity ring.
A core identity ring.
The sources have a specific name for this, AYAS, the seed of identity. They call it the unburdened field, which is just a beautiful concept.
Mhm.
How is it defined by the geometry?
Geometrically, it's this perfect continuous loop that's created right where all four of those toroidal fields overlap.
All four of them.
All four. It's the absolute minimum amplitude where the self can exist. It's pure crystalline existence, just humming at its most efficient minimal frequency.
And what's so fascinating is the claim that this ring is the permanent transition point between inside and outside,
Yes.
which means the observer of the self is the junction point itself.
Which is such an elegant solution to the old philosophical observer problem, isn't it? The
Yeah.
identity isn't some little person sitting in a control room watching the show.
Right.
The identity is the boundary. It's the place where the internal field and the external field come into direct continuous contact.
So when your external self is screaming for the donut and your internal self is protesting, the core ring is that space in between where the decision actually lives.
Exactly. And the decision that's made depends on the coherence and the harmony of the whole system at that moment.
That makes it actionable.
Mm.
So if you're feeling a high degree of existential confusion, a real lack of identity, structurally what's happening is you're failing to maintain the integrity of that core ring.
You're losing the coherent overlap. The boundary is becoming fuzzy, indistinct. And the sources would suggest that the way to find it again, to find that AYS seed, is what we often call a deep flow state.
Or meditation.
Or profound meditation, yes. When you quiet the constant noise from the external world and you quiet the endless storytelling of the internal self, you're left with just the pure hum of that junction point.
The unburdened field.
And that minimal self is the one thing that can't be corrupted or damaged. It's the structural constant of you.
Okay, so that's layer one, the static foundational structure, the three bands of self. And now we have to get it moving. We need to look at the dynamic engine. If the node is a perpetual motion machine, what is it that creates that constant, endless flow?
The motion comes from field resonance and harmonic interference. We've established the four tori.
Right.
Well, each of those tori isn't perfectly smooth. It has 12 specific resonance peaks.
12 points of maximum intensity, like little magnetic poles.
That's a great analogy. 12 points of maximum field intensity around the core.
So 4 tori, 12 peaks each. That's 48 potential spots in total. But the model organizes this into a specific 24-48 architecture. How did that math work out?
It's all defined by the hemispheres of the structure. You have 12 resonance peaks in the northern hemisphere, which are called the archetypes.
The archetypes.
And they are interwound or phase-locked with 12 corresponding peaks in the southern hemisphere. Those are the shadows.
Okay, so let's break that down. The two interior tori, the internal self, they generate 12 internal archetypes and 12 internal shadows. And the two exterior tori, the external self, they generate 12 external archetypes and 12 external shadows.
Exactly. And that gives you a total of 48 unique paths or orbital expressions for the node to take.
48 modes of being.
You could say that. The 24 archetypes are the modes of coherent expression, and the 24 shadows are their reactive, phase-locked counter modes.
This is where we need a really concrete example. When the source says archetype, it's not like a Jungian metaphor. It's a specific geometric peak of energy flow. So what would one of these archetypes and its shadow actually look like in a person's life?
Okay, let's take a simple one implied by the structure in the source material. Let's say archetype number 5 on an external torus is the builder.
The builder, okay.
This is the urge to physically organize, to construct things, to create order in the external world.
So its corresponding shadow number 5 in the southern hemisphere?
It would have to be the destroyer. The reactive urge to deconstruct, to critique, to tear down structures.
And the sources are emphatic that this opposition, this pairing, is the engine.
It is the perpetual motion engine. They're phase-locked mirrors. They have to move in opposition to each other.
So when the builder part of you is expressing itself,
The destroyer is moving in the opposite spiral direction. This ensures that as soon as a structure is built, the potential for its eventual dissolution is also being generated at the same time.
It's the push and pull.
It's that constant compensation, that tension that prevents stasis. It literally generates the ongoing flow of conscious thought. It is the geometric definition of dynamic tension.
So our consciousness is literally driven by its own internal structured conflict. Okay, so we have these 24 resonance peaks, and they define the flow. The sources call this the vector language of seasons.
That's right, because the 24 peaks represent all the possible combinations of inward and outward flow, and those combinations map perfectly onto the experience of the 4 seasons.
So the seasons aren't just a metaphor here. They are a vector. They give direction and intensity to the node's energy.
Precisely.
Okay, let's define them using this flow model. Summer has to be the peak outward flow, right?
Pure expression, action, maximal interaction with the external world. The external disk is spinning at its fastest.
And winter, then, is the opposite. Peak inward flow.
Deep introspection, rest, maximal internal consolidation. The internal disk is dominant. The system is recharging.
And the transitions, spring and fall.
They're defined by speed. Spring is that rapid acceleration outward. It's the buildup of external potential. And fall is the necessary deceleration, the slowing down to process all the external experiences before you can go into that deep winter rest.
The sources claim that the unique profile of a node, its personality, for lack of a better word, is defined by how long it spends in each of these seasons.
Yes, and that's what gives its orbit a specific shape. This is where geometry really starts to define your personal experience.
How so?
The unique weighting and duration of your personal seasons is what creates the specific elliptical shape of each of those 48 orbits.
So if your personal flow is, say, weighted toward long, intense summers of action and drive,
And very short, inefficient winters where you don't get enough rest.
your orbit will be highly elongated, stretched out,
Yeah.
potentially volatile.
Exactly. And someone else might have a very different elliptical shape defined by long winters of thought and short bursts of summer action.
This leads to what might be the most powerful philosophical insight in the whole document. And it's a law of physics here. Perfect balance is death. Deviation is life.
Yes.
Why is a perfectly circular orbit, one where all 4 seasons are exactly equal, why is that considered static or dead?
It's about efficiency versus creativity. A perfectly circular orbit where spring, summer, fall, and winter are all exactly 90 degrees of the cycle. That represents maximum efficiency.
The lowest energy state.
The lowest amplitude, most stable structure possible. It's crystalline, it's non-conscious, it is maximally efficient, but it doesn't do anything new. It just holds the minimum charge. That is the geometry of static death.
So if a person actually achieved perfect balance, they would collapse into their core identity ring and just stop interacting.
They would minimize their expression entirely. They'd become unseen, unmeasured, non-creative. Life and consciousness itself requires dynamic coherence.
A stable asymmetry.
A stable asymmetry. An elliptical orbit. The very deviation from that perfect circle, the fact that your summer might last for 6 months and your winter only 2, that is the engine of your growth, your story, your expansion.
Deviation is the engine of time.
It literally generates your timeline. The moment you achieve perfect structural balance, you are, for all intents and purposes, leaving the dynamic plane of existence.
That's an incredible reframing of instability. So the pressure we feel, the stress of the seasons changing in our lives, the fact that we can't just hold some easy, perfect flow, that is literal proof that we're alive and growing.
It is. We have to be slightly off balance to remain vibrant.
Okay, so we've covered the structure in layer 1 and the movement in layer 2. Now we have to go into the 4th dimension to really understand how the node interacts with reality itself.
And this is conceptually the weirdest part of the whole model.
The 4th dimensional projection. And the core idea here is just, it's a mind bender. That the internal toriers are not really internal.
4th dimensionally, they're the same as the external.
That just challenges our entire perception of being a separate self.
It completely collapses the illusion that you are sealed off inside your skin. This 4D symmetry dictates that your internal reality, all your memories, your fears, your narratives about the world, it must constantly project outward.
It has nowhere else to go.
There is no in for it to stay in. It has to radiate.
Okay, so how does this internal projection actually show up in our 3D world?
It manifests in 2 major measurable ways. First, the internal self projects these geometric cones that perfectly and seamlessly fill the north and south openings of the external torus structure.
So that completes the overall spherical shape of the node.
Right. You are structurally a sphere, but you are dynamically a torus. And second, and this is where it really starts to affect reality, the entire internal state radiates outward to create a cloud of probability around the node.
A cloud of probability. So my internal story, my imagined past, my anxiety about the future, that's not just a thought in my head.
It is an energetic field of potential that you are broadcasting.
Resonating into the local field.
It literally shapes your surroundings. If you are internally projecting fear and constantly anticipating betrayal, that frequency, that probability cloud, will resonantly construct the local field to deliver experiences that match it.
It's not just a feeling. It's a field generator.
It's a field generator.
This gives a profound literal meaning to the idea that we resonate our surroundings. My trauma doesn't just hurt me inside. It actively warps space-time around me, forcing the environment to reflect that internal warp.
Exactly right. When you walk into a room, you're not just bringing your physical body, you are bringing your entire probability cloud with you.
Which explains why some people can walk in and the whole room calms down.
Because a coherent, stable node radiates a field that settles the probability cloud. It makes interaction feel predictable and safe. A chaotic node radiates an unstable field, and everyone feels on edge.
Okay, so let's pull this entire system through time. We have these 48 elliptical orbits. The source material uses a helix analogy. I like the visual of a slinky.
The slinky is a perfect visual. The helix is the waveform of your identity. As the node moves through time, each of those elliptical orbits stretches out, becoming a helix or a slinky. And that helix is the record of your trajectory through space-time.
It records every single rise and fall of energy, every seasonal shift.
Everything. And since the archetype and its shadow are those phase-locked mirrors,
They braid together.
they form double helixes, which is an obvious and powerful analogy to DNA. This double helix defines that specific archetype's presence throughout your entire timeline.
So you could, in theory, read a person's entire life story, their waveform identity, just by analyzing the shape of these helices.
You could see the degree of the elliptical squash, the compression, the wavelength. You'd see exactly where their summers and winters were.
We can use the neutron analogy from the text to really drive home why that elliptical deviation is so important. If our living node is defined by this asymmetrical elliptical slinky, what about a neutral node, like a neutron?
The neutron in this model is a perfect node. It's one that has achieved that structural symmetry we talked about, a perfectly circular orbit.
So when you stretch that perfectly circular orbit out across time,
Its slinky has a perfectly even wavelength. Its seasons are all equal. Spring, summer, fall, and winter are all the same smooth, predictable expression.
and the sources say this evenness, this perfect balance, makes the neutron unseen and unmeasured by the rest of the dynamic asymmetrical world.
Because it offers no directional bias, it has immense potential energy, but it has no story, no deviation, no asymmetry for our third-dimensional instruments to latch onto. Our reality is built on contrast and flow. It can only perceive asymmetry.
So a neutron only becomes real to us when it decays.
The moment it decays, it's because some external field forced a deviation, created an ellipse, and gave it a season to express. It gave it a story.
So the story of my life is literally the asymmetrical pattern of my 48 helices.
It is the geometric record.
Yeah,
It
Jill.
shows which archetypes you expressed, how long you expressed them, and how fast your transitions were. And now we have to look at how all those helices interact.
They don't just exist in isolation.
Not at all. The 48 double helices of your own identity are constantly interlocking with each other. But crucially, they also interlock with the helices of other nodes.
And this creates the fractal chainmail lattice.
It creates a fractal, scalable, interwoven 4D lattice that defines all of existence, the conscious chainmail.
And the geometry is isomorphic. It's the same at every scale.
The geometry of interaction remains the same, whether you're looking at two protons interacting, two people having a conversation, or two civilizations at war. The flow of their seasonal cycles determines the tension and the stability of the weave between them.
So right now, as we're talking, our external torias are weaving their helical patterns together in real time.
We are literally weaving a piece of the lattice together. And this is the truly staggering realization, the point that pulls all the physics and the philosophy together into one.
What's that?
Our identity is not something that is traveling on the surface of this lattice. Our identity is what makes the lattice.
We are not the travelers. We're the weave.
We are the structural integrity of reality itself.
Okay, if we are the chainmail, if we are the weave,
Yeah.
then the whole concept of free will has to be completely reevaluated. It can't be some metaphysical ghost in the machine. It has to be a geometric event.
It has to be.
So where in this incredibly complex interwoven lattice,
Mm-hmm.
where is the moment of choice?
Free will is located at a very specific place. It exists at the intersection points in the chainmail where your internal and your external helical orbits cross over.
So it's the moment in time and space where the field you're projecting from inside meets the field you're actually inhabiting outside.
Exactly. So it's not some grand divine moment of intervention.
It's a traffic junction.
It's a traffic junction. And free will is the ability to jump tracks, to transfer from one helical orbit, one seasonal path, one archetype to a neighboring one.
Okay, so I'm flowing along my current path, my habit.
Archetype A, let's say it's the critic. And you arrive at an intersection point where you perceive another potential track. You see the possibility of jumping to archetype B, the observer.
And free will is the capacity to make that jump.
It is.
But what determines whether that jump is successful? Because we all know that feeling of trying to change a habit and just immediately snapping back to the old way.
The success of the jump depends entirely on the internal state of the node, on its coherence. The decision is wisest and the orbital transfer is easiest when the node is in proper oscillation.
Meaning it's humming close to that central core identity ring.
Right, because a coherent node has a clear, non-distorted view of its entire orbital map. It can see all the potential paths and choose the one that costs the least amount of system energy and best serves the overall harmony of the whole structure.
So coherence isn't about being good or bad. It's about having a clear, undistorted map of potential consequences. It's structural honesty.
That's a great way to put it. Structural honesty. If you're far from your center, agitated and incoherent, your orbital map gets fuzzy. You only see two options, fight or flight.
But if you're humming at the center,
The full 48 potential paths open up, and you can see that the transition to a more harmonious state is actually a very low energy move.
this brings us to the ultimate paradox of free will in this model. The source material says it can get to the point where we no longer can choose, we just are.
Which sounds like the opposite of freedom, but it's not. This is true free will. It's the transcendence of cognitive choice.
It's not about having the maximum number of choices.
Yeah, it's the state where the node's internal intent, what it wants to be, and the external field it's generating around itself are so perfectly aligned that the next optimal action simply is. It just happens.
You see this with master musicians or elite athletes. They aren't choosing the next note or the next move.
They're just executing the necessary perfect action without thought. They inhabit a lattice that perfectly matches their preferred coherent orbits. There's no struggle because the internal projection and the external reality have aligned.
Choice implies conflict. True freedom is the absence of that conflict.
The node just flows along the optimal path, effortless and necessary.
Okay, now for the anchor. The physical proof that grounds this entire, frankly, wild model. The structure of the node itself. The four chori, the 24 archetypes and their 24 shadows, plus the 2 poles. It adds up to a specific number of major energetic points.
It does. The 26 major points that define this architecture, this maximum stable configuration of dynamic flow, they are not an arbitrary number. This entire structure is geometrically identical. It is isomorphic to the most stable energetic configuration of an iron atom.
Iron, fire. This is the iron mandala, the physical signature of coherence.
It is.
So the blueprint for stable consciousness is the same as the blueprint for stable physical matter. But why iron? Why is that the anchor?
Because iron 56 is the most stable atomic nucleus in the entire universe. It sits at the very peak of the nuclear binding energy curve. This isomorphism, this identical geometry, suggests that the most stable atomic configuration physically mirrors the most stable consciousness configuration dynamically.
And iron is the universal anchor.
It is. It forms the magnetic core of living planets, providing the vast, stable toroidal field that allows smaller nodes, like us, to exist within it, and in biology.
It carries life, red blood cells.
It's essential in red blood cells to move energy and oxygen coherently through the body. It is the universal conductor and stabilizer.
So when you are experiencing a high state of coherence, you are literally physically adopting the most stable geometric flow pattern known to physics.
The pattern of the iron atom is a truly profound connection between mind and matter.
This geometric framework now lets us redefine things like trauma and healing in purely structural terms. So if we're looking at the flow dynamics of this system, what is trauma?
In this framework, trauma is orbital lock. It's not just a bad memory. It's a physical, geometric deformation of the chainmail itself.
A deformation.
A sudden, severe shock or even chronic low-level stress. It acts like a weld in the chainmail. It fuses the pathways between your orbits.
So you lose your fluidity.
You lose your fluidity entirely. The node gets locked onto a single, often painful or reactive helical track. A stuck season. Your full orbital map just collapses, and the feeling of free will vanishes.
Because the capacity to jump tracks is gone.
It's gone. You're forced to perpetually repeat the same season, the same reaction, the same pain, over and over and over.
That's a devastatingly clear picture. Can you give an example of a stuck season?
Absolutely. Think about a permanent interior winter orbit. What would that look like?
Deep depression. Chronic avoidance. Just collapse.
Total collapse. The node is stuck in perpetual introspection, and it's incapable of generating the outward energy it needs for a spring or a summer expression.
And the opposite. A permanent external summer orbit.
That's chronic burnout. It's people-pleasing. It's addiction to outward validation. You're always acting, always expressing, always performing, but you're never able to turn inward for rest and processing.
And both states are defined by that loss of the elliptical flow that defines life.
It's a loss of dynamism.
Yeah.
So the structural solution then has to be the creative self.
The creative self.
Which is defined here as the active, fluid ability to navigate and flow between those orbits again. It's the process of restoring your capacity to traverse the chainmail.
So healing isn't about erasing the memory of the trauma.
No. It's the process of carefully, consciously reheating and remolding those welded junctions in the chainmail to restore the node's full seasonal range of motion.
Now let's scale this up to the social level. The source material points to a kind of war on coherence, that historical and even current systems are deliberately manipulating the collective chainmail.
They do. And it's because a coherent and fluid population can utilize free will effectively. They can jump tracks, they can innovate, they can self-organize.
Which is threatening to a static power structure.
So systems like punitive justice, or creating economic precarity, or using systemic shame, these are often, whether consciously or not, deployed to traumatically weld the collective chainmail.
To lock populations into fixed dysfunctional orbits, perpetual fear or perpetual competition.
And if people are locked in those orbits, they are very easily controlled.
The text gives a great comparison between two common social orbital locks. The first one is the successful prisoner.
Ah, yes. This is the individual who is locked into that exterior summer orbit. They're constantly performing, achieving, chasing the next promotion, the next metric. They need constant outward validation to feel any sense of worth.
They're very productive for the system.
Incredibly productive.
Yeah.
But internally, they are completely depleted. They can never rest or reflect. They are quite literally trapped by their own success.
And their mirror image is the punished prisoner,
who is locked into the interior winter orbit. They're defined by deep shame, collapse, invisibility. Unable to express outwardly, they often become chronically unwell or self-destructive.
And both are orbital locks. The system relies on this loss of fluidity, this inability to switch tracks to maintain its own static structure.
Precisely.
So this implies that the goal of a truly coherent civilization isn't to force everyone into a single perfect orbit.
God, no.
It's to create the structural conditions, like, say, universal basic stability, that allow every single node to hum near its center ring, making that orbital transfer a low-risk, high-integrity activity for everyone.
You're creating a resonant ecology, and this brings us to a really beautiful structural definition of compassion. The sources say we should try to see everyone as an absolutely perfect being who is dealing with a lot of trauma.
That reframes every single interaction you could have. The perfection is the core architecture. The trauma is just the surface warp.
And the coherence calculation confirms it. The core architecture, the AYS ring, the 48 potential orbits, that iron mandala geometry, it's intact in everyone. It has to be.
The surface projection, the personality you're seeing, that's just the result of the trauma field. It's the single restrictive track they're currently locked into.
Right. And the proof of this, the sources claim, is instantaneous. It happens in that moment of genuine human connection, a shared laugh, a real smile.
What happens in that moment structurally?
The moment we smile at someone, genuinely, we briefly stabilize their field. We offer a resonant frequency that momentarily counteracts their trauma field. And for a split second, the perfect being flickers to the surface.
It's a momentary, coherent shift of orbit.
A tiny, low-energy track jump back toward their core ring. And that's why the smile often fades so quickly. fear, or defensive patterns, or just the gravitational pull of the harsh external field. It pulls their trajectory right back to the painful, welded track they're used to.
But that flicker is the proof. It confirms their core engine is sound. The problem is the welded chainmail they're trapped in and the distorted probability field they're forced to keep resonating.
It means collective coherence is not some utopian dream. It's an engineered resonance field.
A coherent civilization is not a monoculture of perfect static circles.
It's a galaxy of highly diverse, unique elliptical orbits, where every node sings its own unique, perfect song, and all those songs weave together to create a stable, beautiful, harmonic field.
This has been an incredibly deep and comprehensive dive into what the sources call the architecture of being. We've gone from abstract geometry all the way to the structural definition of our day-to-day experience. Let's just quickly synthesize the core concepts.
We started by mapping the living node as a unified field of 4 interlocked tori. That generates the 3 critical bands of self, all anchored by that unburdened AYS ring.
And we saw how that structure generates the dynamic field of 48 elliptical seasonal orbits.
We then pulled those orbits through time, and they became the 48 helices that interlock with everything else, creating the fractal chainmail of reality itself.
We redefine free will not as some abstract choice, but as the very real geometric ability to perform an orbital transfer at the intersection points of that chainmail.
And we grounded it all with the physical proof of the iron isomorphism, showing that stable matter and stable consciousness share the exact same 26-point geometry.
Finally, we reframed trauma as a structural welding of that chainmail, a process that locks the node into a painful single track or a stuck season.
And I think the ultimate revelation, the one that really changes how you interact with your world, is that your internal self is fundamentally not internal. Its cloud of probability radiates out and literally, resonantly constructs the shared reality we all inhabit.
You are constantly generating the environment you experience.
And the goal isn't perfect, static quietude. The goal is to orchestrate a magnificent, dynamic, asymmetrical symphony of existence. Every fluctuation is essential as long as it remains within the bounds of a stable elliptical orbit.
So we want to leave you with this final provocative thought. It builds on this knowledge that trauma is an orbital lock, a fusion of pathways that restricts your expression and can remove your feeling of free will. If you were to look at your own current life pattern, what specific orbit, what seasonal path are you stuck on right now? Are you in a permanent winter of inaction or an endless summer of burnout?
And critically, what is the lowest energy next step? What is the smallest, most feasible orbital transfer you could make right now to gently begin to unlock that weld and restore your full, beautiful, dynamic range of motion?